For years, Henry VIII had been haunted by a single obsession: securing a male heir to continue the Tudor dynasty. In the 16th century, the stability of a kingdom depended on its ruler producing a strong, legitimate successor. Without a son, a king's legacy and the very future of his realm could be thrown into chaos. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, had given him only one surviving child, a daughter Mary, but no son. Henry grew restless, convinced that his marriage was cursed. So he could annul his marriage and marry the woman he believed would finally give him a son, Anne Boleyn. But Anne too failed him. She had one surviving daughter, Elizabeth, but multiple miscarriages followed. Henry, once passionately devoted to Anne, began to see her as a disappointment. Their love story, once so full of defiance and intensity, turned into bitter resentment. In May 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested on charges of adultery, treason, and incest. Whether the accusations were true or false didn't matter. Henry had made up his mind. On May 19, 1536, she was executed by a French swordsman at the Tower of London. The very next day, Henry VIII was already making plans to marry another woman. Her name was Jane Seymour. But who was Jane Seymour? How did she rise from the shadows of Henry's previous wives and secure her place in history? Jane Seymour was born around 1508 or 1509 at Wolfhall in Wiltshire. She came from a noble but not particularly powerful family. Her father, Sir John Seymour, was a respected knight, and her mother, Marjorie Wentworth, had distant royal blood. Unlike Anne Boleyn, who was educated in the sophisticated courts of Europe, Jane's upbringing was traditional. She was not highly educated, but she was skilled in household management, needlework, and the virtues of a dutiful noblewoman. By the early months of 1536, the marriage between Henry and Anne Boleyn was collapsing. What had once been a whirlwind romance had soured into disappointment and distrust. Anne had failed to deliver a male heir, suffering several miscarriages after the birth of their daughter Elizabeth. These events, combined with her increasingly tense relationship with key figures at court and her inability to produce a male heir, led to a noticeable decline in her favor with the king. Around this time, Jane Seymour, who had been serving as a lady-in-waiting, first to Catherine of Aragon and later to Anne Boleyn, began to attract the king's attention. Jane came from a respected noble family and had a reputation for modesty and obedience, traits that contrasted with Anne's more assertive and politically active nature. It's unclear exactly when Henry's eyes first fell on Jane, but by the early spring of 1536, she had clearly caught his attention. She was everything Anne was not: submissive, pious, traditional. Where Anne had been flirtatious and witty, Jane was soft-spoken and reserved. There's a famous story from this period. Henry sent Jane a letter, along with a purse of money and some lavish gifts. It was the typical move of a king: flatter, tempt, and win. During this period, Henry's dissatisfaction with Anne Boleyn deepened. She was arrested on May 2, 1536, on charges of adultery, incest, and treason. While Anne awaited trial, Jane was moved into private chambers at court, given generous lodgings near the king. When Anne was arrested, Jane was being prepared to take her place. She reportedly wore white and gold, the colors of a bride, while Anne sat imprisoned in the Tower. On May 19, Anne Boleyn was executed by sword, and less than 24 hours later, Henry was engaged to Jane Seymour. On May 30, 1536, they were married in a quiet ceremony at Whitehall Palace. Jane did not receive a coronation immediately after her marriage, unlike Catherine and Anne. Some historians believe this was due to the recent turmoil surrounding Anne's downfall. Nonetheless, she was publicly acknowledged as queen and began fulfilling the traditional duties expected of a royal consort. Jane's approach to queenship was markedly different from that of her predecessor, Anne Boleyn. She adopted a more traditional and conservative role, emphasizing modesty, obedience, and household management rather than political engagement. Henry saw Jane as the ideal wife. Unlike Catherine, she did not challenge him politically. Unlike Anne, she did not argue or seek influence at court. Jane understood that her power lay in pleasing the king and securing the future of the Tudor dynasty. She did, however, make one major request of Henry. She urged him to reconcile with his daughter Mary, Catherine of Aragon's child. Mary had been declared illegitimate after Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn, but Jane worked to bring her back to court. Though Henry did not restore Mary's place in the succession, he did allow her to return to the royal household. By early 1537, less than a year into her marriage to Henry, Jane Seymour announced that she was pregnant. This news was met with immense joy and anticipation at court. For Henry, this was a pivotal moment. After years of disappointment with Catherine and Anne Boleyn, Jane's pregnancy revived his hopes of finally securing the male heir he had long desired. On October 12, 1537, after a long and difficult labor lasting more than 2 days, Jane Seymour gave birth to a healthy son at Hampton Court Palace. The child was named Edward. For Henry, this was a moment of triumph. His dynasty's future was secure, and he finally had a legitimate male successor. At court, Jane was praised and honored for achieving what neither Catherine of Aragon nor Anne Boleyn had been able to do. But the joy was short-lived. Jane had endured a difficult labor, and soon after Edward's birth, she developed a postpartum infection. At first, it seemed like she was recovering, even attending Edward's christening on October 15, but her condition worsened rapidly. By October 17, Jane was seriously ill. The royal physicians did everything they could, but on October 24, 1537, just 12 days after giving birth, Jane Seymour died. Henry was devastated. He declared a period of mourning for 3 months, something he had not done for Catherine of Aragon or Anne Boleyn. Her son Edward VI would become King of England at just 9 years old. His reign was brief and died at age 15, but for Henry, Jane had done what no other wife could. Perhaps the greatest sign of Henry's love for Jane was his final request. When he died in 1547, he chose to be buried beside her. She was the only wife he gave that honor, resting with him at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, a place reserved for royal legacy and remembrance.